But the Diesel brothers say their business was targeted, and this case actually had little to do with saving Utah's air quality.
A federal judge ordered the custom truck makers to pay more than $800,000 to the U.S. government as well as Davis County.
On the morning of October 7th, 2025, federal marshals showed up at David Heavy D. Sparks' Utah home and put him in handcuffs. The man who had spent nearly a decade building diesel trucks, flying Black Hawk helicopters, giving away monster trucks, and turning Diesel Brothers into a television empire, was suddenly sitting in Salt Lake County Jail on contempt of court charges. 5 months later, his 15-year marriage was heading toward divorce. Then came the revelations about his partnership with David Diesel Dave Kiley, the friendship that started it all. What happened to Heavy D, his marriage, and the partnership behind Diesel Brothers. Join us as we uncover the story that unfolded far beyond the cameras. The road that led to Discovery Channel. The most important thing to understand about how Diesel Brothers started is that it was never supposed to be a television show. Dave Sparks and Dave Kiley were two friends in Utah who built outrageous diesel trucks and put the footage online. For a long time, that was the entire operation. Post videos, build an audience, repeat. The trucks were genuinely extraordinary. The chemistry between the two Daves was real rather than manufactured. And the audience they built online grew large enough to attract exactly the kind of attention that changes everything. Jay Leno found them first. The legendary comedian and car collector discovered their YouTube channel, brought them onto his own show, and gave them a credibility endorsement that no amount of paid promotion could have replicated. That introduction opened the door to a Discovery Channel conversation that led to the premiere of Diesel Brothers on January 4th, 2016. The show followed their Sparks Motors operation in Utah, building, modifying, and giving away custom diesel trucks. And it pulled an audience that made Discovery very glad it had signed them. The show ran for 8 seasons and over 70 episodes, and the formula built around Heavy D and Diesel Dave had the same energy that had worked on YouTube. Genuine friendship between two people who shared an obsession and expressed it in ways that were simultaneously impressive and completely unhinged. They built trucks that breathed fire. They launched trucks off ramps into lakes. They crashed trucks into things trucks should not be crashed into. They gave trucks away to veterans, to families in need, to strangers who had no idea what was about to happen to them. And they documented all of it with a recklessness that made every episode feel like something could go catastrophically wrong at any moment. And that was entirely the point. Behind the cameras, though, something had been building since 2016 that nobody on television ever wanted to address. A lawsuit filed the same year the show launched was getting bigger, more expensive, and more dangerous with every passing season. And Heavy D's decisions about how to handle it would eventually cost him his freedom, his marriage, and his closest friendship. So what exactly were they being accused of? And why did the case take nearly a decade to fully detonate? The lawsuit that changed everything. In 2016, a group called the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment filed a lawsuit against Heavy D. Sparks and his associates, including Diesel Dave Kiley, Josh Redbeard Stewart, and Keaton Hoskins, accusing them of selling and installing defeat devices on diesel trucks. Defeat devices are components designed to bypass emissions control systems, allowing trucks to produce the thick black smoke that the diesel community calls rolling coal. The practice is illegal under the Clean Air Act, which sets federal standards for vehicle emissions that manufacturers and modifiers must meet. The initial demand from UPHE was staggering, $114 million. When the evidence landed in court, the numbers were genuinely difficult to dispute. Court records showed that one of their modified trucks emitted 36 times more pollutants than a properly functioning vehicle, and laboratory testing of a Sparks Motors truck found particulate emissions 21 times the legal limit. These were not borderline exceedances. They were levels that the plaintiffs argued represented a documented and serious public health threat. The federal court agreed. In March 2020, U.S. District Court Judge Robert Shelby ruled against Heavy D and his co-defendants, ordering them to pay substantial civil penalties. Appeals followed, extending the timeline and adding legal costs to the already significant judgment. In 2021, the appeals court upheld the ruling and specifically described the Diesel brothers' conduct as flagrant misconduct. The total amount owed exceeded $850,000 in penalties and legal costs, along with a permanent ban on tampering with emissions equipment. Heavy D pushed back against the premise, arguing that most of their refurbished trucks were sold outside Utah and therefore beyond state jurisdiction. Judge Shelby was unmoved. The Clean Air Act is federal and does not stop at state lines. Court records also showed that Sparks made $482,000 from his Discovery Channel partnership alone in just 2 years between 2016 and 2018, which made his argument that he could not afford the judgment very difficult to maintain. The judge rejected it entirely. And then Heavy D made a series of decisions that turned an already serious civil case into something that required handcuffs. What exactly did he do next? And when did the court decide it had run out of patience? The asset transfers, the contempt orders, and the morning the marshals arrived. After the final judgment was entered, Heavy D was required to do two things: pay the money and provide the plaintiffs with full financial disclosures to verify his ability to pay. He did neither. The financial disclosures were withheld. The fines went unpaid. And when the court examined what had been happening with Sparks Motors assets during the same period, it found that the consequences went well beyond additional fines. In August 2025, Sparks was found in contempt of court for the second time after it was established that he had transferred vehicles, including a Tesla and a Ram, in direct violation of a court order prohibiting him from moving assets. He was simultaneously claiming he lacked the resources to pay the judgment while those transfers were being made, and courts are not sympathetic to defendants who move assets and then claim poverty. Judge Shelby had seen enough. On October 2, 2025, an arrest warrant was issued. 5 days later, at 7:33 in the morning on October 7, 2025, federal marshals arrived at his Bountiful, Utah address and took him into custody. Heavy D was booked into Salt Lake County Jail on contempt charges for failing to pay $843,000 in court-ordered fees. And because of his public profile, he was placed in protective custody, approximately 23 hours a day in lockdown. He spent 3 days in that facility before a judge ordered his immediate release on October 10, 2025, during a contempt hearing where he finally agreed to provide the required financial disclosures. He walked out, saying he felt vindicated. Whether that framing reflected the actual terms of his release or the brand of optimism he had always carried is a question the case's ongoing status left wide open. The contempt situation was temporarily resolved, but the underlying debt remained. And simultaneously, federal investigators were examining the Black Hawk helicopter Heavy D had been flying at public events, including Camp RZR 2023 and 2025, offering rides to passengers without what appeared to be proper FAA authorization for commercial passenger flights, adding an entirely new layer of regulatory exposure to an already complicated situation. The arrest made headlines across the automotive world. What it also did, quietly and privately, was accelerate the unraveling of the professional relationship that had made the whole empire possible. Because when the smoke cleared, the show was already gone, and so was the partnership that built it. What had actually ended the Diesel Brothers television show? And did Heavy D and Diesel Dave walk away willingly, or were they pushed out? The freedom that cost them their partnership. When fans noticed fewer episodes airing after Season 8 in 2022, the immediate assumption was that Discovery had pulled the plug because of the lawsuit's negative publicity. Heavy D and Diesel Dave pushed back against that narrative directly and firmly. According to a statement on Sparks Motors' website, the brothers made the decision themselves. They wanted to reclaim creative control and felt that the digital platform gave them everything the television deal could not, without the network restrictions, production schedules, or creative compromises that cable television demanded. The math behind the decision made sense. On Discovery, they worked within a production structure, scripts, schedules, months between filming and broadcast, and network input on what the show was and was not allowed to be. On YouTube, Heavy D could buy a surplus military Black Hawk helicopter and have a video of himself flying it posted before anyone had time to ask whether this was appropriate. The creative freedom was total, the audience relationship was direct, and the revenue potential from merchandise, events, and sponsorships did not require a split with a network. What the transition to digital also did was remove the shared professional infrastructure that had kept Heavy D and Diesel Dave aligned through years of different personalities and different ambitions. Without a production season pulling them toward the same goal on the same schedule, the things that made them different from each other started mattering more than the things that had always made them work together. Heavy D threw himself into large-scale entrepreneurial ventures, acquiring the rights to the Nikola Badger and Power Sports programs after Nikola collapsed, launching EMBR Motors with plans to bring electric UTVs and personal watercraft to market, hosting the annual Heavy Academy Conference on Business Strategy, and appearing in Monster Jam. Diesel Dave moved in his own direction, focusing on entertainment and brand work that reflected his strengths rather than the shared operation they had built together. When Heavy D finally addressed the split publicly, he described it not as a fight or a single dramatic moment, but as a slow drift. Different visions for what came next, pulling two people in directions that the television show had previously kept parallel. The lawsuit had consumed enormous amounts of his time, energy, and emotional capacity for years. Building new ventures, fighting a federal case, managing a team, and trying to stay present for a friendship required more bandwidth than he had, and something was going to give. But losing a longtime friendship was only one part of the life Heavy D was trying to hold together. Within months of leaving jail, another chapter of his personal life was coming to an end. So what happened to his marriage? And what did those 3 days behind bars ultimately force him to confront? What 3 days in solitary actually showed him? 5 months after Heavy D walked out of Salt Lake County Jail, his wife Ashley filed for divorce. The filing occurred in March 2026, ending a marriage of more than 15 years and a family of 3 children. Ashley Sparks filed to end the marriage in a Utah court in March 2026, and the circumstances leading to that filing had been building across the same years that the lawsuit was escalating. The show was ending, and the friendship with Diesel Dave was cooling. 3 days in solitary confinement does something to a person's understanding of their own life that no amount of success or public optimism can override. Heavy D had built his entire public persona around controlled chaos. The trucks, the helicopters, the stunts, the generosity, the unshakable confidence that everything would work out, because it always had. The arrest was the first moment that formula stopped functioning. He could not build his way out of a contempt charge. He could not post a video that reframed it into something compelling. He was in a cell, alone, with 23 hours a day to sit with what the previous decade had actually produced. What that time showed him about the gap between the person he had been presenting publicly and the person he was actually living as privately is something he has only begun to address in public statements made after October 2025. The tone shifted noticeably. The combativeness that had characterized his earlier comments about the lawsuit, pushing back on jurisdiction, arguing about proportionality, suggesting the enforcement was excessive, gave way to something that acknowledged the reality of what had happened more directly. He said he understood why the contempt charges had been brought. He did not frame himself as a pure victim of an overzealous legal system. He acknowledged that the period had been profoundly difficult for his family in ways that went beyond anything he had publicly expressed, while the case was still escalating. The divorce, the split with Diesel Dave, the arrest, the helicopter inquiry, and the unresolved emissions case all converged into a period of Heavy D's life that bore no resemblance to the show that made him famous. Diesel Brothers had been about building things, giving things away, having the kind of fun that your audience wanted to be part of. The years after it were about paying consequences, navigating loss, and figuring out who you are when the structure that defined your public identity ends and the fallout from how you built it arrives all at once. He said he survived it. Given what the period looked like on paper, surviving may genuinely be the most accurate thing to say. But the question is what he built from the rubble and whether any of it is holding, where Heavy D is now, and what the show left. By mid-2026, Sparks Motors was still operating. The emissions case, while enormously damaging, had not ended the business. Federal oversight disrupted certain activities, including a garage sale that required specific judicial permission to proceed. But the shop remained open, and Heavy D remained a figure that the diesel truck community had not abandoned. His YouTube channel continued to produce content, and the audience that had followed him through the arrest and the divorce demonstrated the kind of loyalty built over years rather than assembled through a single viral moment. The EMBR Motors project remained in development, representing the entrepreneurial ambition that has always been his most consistent characteristic. The man who built a YouTube channel into a discovery show was not going to stop building simply because one chapter had collapsed around him. The Heavy Academy conference continued, and the specific irony of someone who had just spent 3 days in jail for financial non-compliance, lecturing others on business strategy did not appear to reduce the event's attendance. When the cameras stopped rolling on Diesel Brothers, Diesel Dave didn't disappear. He simply took the build somewhere else. He has continued operating independently, maintaining his own online presence and brand work while still collaborating with Heavy D on select automotive projects. One of the strangest was the Zammoth, a Utah mammoth-themed Zamboni that took Dave far outside the diesel truck world that made him famous. Meanwhile, the two men who built a franchise from nothing have settled into a post-partnership existence without turning their separation into a public spectacle. The show may be gone, but Dave is still building, creating, and keeping the legacy moving. Neither has said anything designed to damage the other. The slow drift that Heavy D described, shaped by different visions and by the pressure the lawsuit placed on everything around it, produced the kind of ending that generates silence rather than dramatic statements. Separate Instagram feeds rather than competing press tours. What Diesel Brothers left behind is something more durable than the drama of its ending. At its best, the show reached an audience that genuinely loved watching two friends build outrageous trucks and give them away to people who needed them. The generosity was real. The veterans, the families, the strangers who had trucks dropped into their lives. And that realness was what separated it from every imitation that followed. You cannot fake two people who are actually friends doing something they actually love, and Diesel Brothers had that quality in the years when it was firing on all cylinders. The years after exposed what was underneath: a man making decisions about emissions equipment and financial disclosures that would put him in a jail cell, a friendship that required a shared stage to stay aligned, a marriage that absorbed 15 years of pressure before it reached a breaking point, and a television show that ended not because it failed, but because the people who made it decided their lives were bigger than what a cable network could contain. Heavy D is still in Utah, and still the person who turned a YouTube channel into something the whole country watched, just with considerably more legal debt, public knowledge of what those years actually cost, and more willingness to say out loud what the cameras behind Diesel Brothers were never designed to capture. The show was great. The story behind it turned out to be bigger. Now that you know everything that really happened behind Diesel Brothers, the 9-year emissions battle, the 3 days in solitary, the divorce, and the slow drift from the best friend he called his brother, does the show hit differently for you? And do you think Heavy D and Diesel Dave will ever find their way back to a shared project? Or has the drift gone too far? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.